All right, here we go. We're going to see how good my memory is. Y'all listen to this? So a couple things happen anytime we encounter stress. The very first thing that's going to happen, your body is going to start making physiological changes to help you survive the tiger attack, right? So it's going to first downregulate your insulin receptors. Why would it want to do that? We need to increase blood sugar, right? Because we need energy. If that tiger's going to get me, what do I got to be able to do? I need to get out of here. I need to be able to run. So I increase blood sugar in order to put what? The sugar into the muscle and the liver for energy substrate so I can go. Another thing that's going to happen is increased blood pressure, increased heart rate. Why? Because I need to circulate those substances around the human body and so that I have the energy. So heart rate goes up, and if I'm running, it probably would be good to have higher blood pressure, right? Higher heart rate in order to keep up with the demand of running because the tiger's coming, I need to get away. So another thing that's going to happen is your blood's going to thicken. Your clotting factors are going to increase. Why is that going to happen? Well, because back in the day, if you had this stress response, it was likely that there could be harm to your body, right? If I'm running from a tiger, do you think you're faster than the tiger? Right, so he's probably going to bite me or scratch me or something, and what needs to happen? I want to bleed out. So this intelligent response is to thicken blood. So clotting factors go up. So now I have increased heart rate, right? Increased blood pressure. I have thick blood. Now watch what happens to your cholesterol. My body's going to downregulate my liver so that it decreases the uptake of LDL cholesterol, which y'all would call the bad cholesterol, right? It's also going to downregulate the production of HDL, which is your good cholesterol. Do you ever see that in your patients? High LDL, low HDL? Now, is this stupid or smart? Smart, right? So why do we need high LDL cholesterol? Is that pathological? No, it's smart. LDL cholesterol is what? It's very important in wound clotting, so you have to have it, and it's the backbone to our stress hormone, cortisol. And if you don't have cortisol, you die. So it's by design. This is a smart reaction, right? So now if I look at this picture, I have high blood pressure, increased heart rate, thick blood, increased sugar and fats in my blood, and I have a chronically changed, what, cholesterol profile. Sound pretty good for something? Did we just figure out how heart disease happens? So another thing that's going to happen is this. I'm stressed out. What does my body use to kind of balance myself after a stress? Say serotonin. Serotonin is our feel-good chemical. So what ends up happening is we're chronically stressed out, so we use up all of our serotonin to help us not feel anxious. Because when you're stressed out, don't you get anxious? Yeah. And so we use serotonin to right that balance. And so we start using up all of our serotonin in order to get rid of the anxiety. So the anxiety starts to go down, but the problem is I don't have any serotonin left to feel good, so I start to get what? Depressed. Serotonin is a precursor to something called melatonin. What do we need that for? Sleep. All right, so now I try to go to bed and I can't turn my mind off, right? Or I wake up in the middle of the night. And so now I'm stressed out and I'm not sleeping, what does that do to you? Right, so I have chronic fatigue and I have insomnia now, right? All right, so another thing that happens with the liver is when it becomes insulin resistant, it also starts to downregulate the action of converting thyroid hormones. So, your thyroid is going to produce two hormones, T3, T4, right? And everyone comes up with different figures on this, but it's roughly about 93, 94% T4 and about 6-7% T3. T3 is the active form. T4 has to be converted. Where does the conversion take place? Liver. So what happens is when the liver gets downregulated, it quits converting T4 to T3. So now we have this big buildup in the blood of T4. Well, my HP axis, my hypothalamus starts to see that, and it's regulating these bloodstreams, and it says, wait, we've got too much T4. Pituitary. Tell the thyroid to quit making T4. So now what happens? T4 goes down, and they do blood work, and they look, and they're like, oh, your thyroid's not working, so we need to put you on a medication. So they put you on levothyroxine, which is what? T4, which you couldn't convert in the first place. And now you have more T4, so now your hypothalamus tells your pituitary to shut down thyroid, and we effectively just kill it. So how often do we have a primary thyroid problem? Say almost never. It's reactive. Quit treating the thyroid. Now we have a chronically changed thyroid, right? We're set up for heart disease. So when my liver gets downregulated, it also stops producing something called sex hormone binding globulin. So sex hormone binding globulin does what? Binds sex hormones, right? So it takes your sex hormones like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone out of the blood, and it escorts them to the bowels to get them out of the body. If we don't have enough, what happens? We start getting a lot of sex hormones roaming freely through the body because they didn't get bound and pulled out. Sex hormones are very mitogenic. Do you know what that word means? Very rapid cell growth and cell division. So what happens if I have these sex hormones that are mitogenic floating around the body and housing where they shouldn't be, causing cell growth with high insulin and high blood sugar? Cancer. Oh, we just explained cancer. Think you could make an impact there? All right, let's see what else happens. So now we've explained what? Cancer, heart disease. What happens when we get insulin resistant and high sugar? Because when you're stressed out, what do you feel like eating all the time? Sugar and fat. Yeah, why do you feel like sugar and fat? Your body's going to crave what it needs to make what? Stress hormones or serotonin. So the stress hormones are what? Sugar, fat based, so your body starts to crave it. So now we start to gain weight. We have high blood sugar, insulin resistance, so that explains why people get what? All right, so now we've got diabetes covered. So now we move in a little further. When you're stressed out, you're going to produce a lot of cortisol, right? Cortisol is catabolic. When you produce cortisol, you're in a fight or flight state, a sympathetic state, so you're never getting into parasympathetic. So when we're surging cortisol, it will literally start to turn off the pathways to produce anabolic hormones like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, which is why your patients have hormone dysregulation. But what does cortisol do? Catabolic hormones do what? So they break tissue down, right? Because we need more blood sugar because we're running from the tiger. So as it starts to break the body down and tear the body down and you go through this, the body gets into a state of inflammation, right? This is where arthritis and everything comes down because it's in a constant state of breakdown. I'm not sleeping. I'm eating junk. So this inflammation takes over, and this is why we start to get fibromyalgia, along with, I'll share another thought with you in just a second, of the other factor in that. So we start to get fibromyalgia, arthritis. Now, another thing is we have sympathetic, parasympathetic, correct? So sympathetic's fight or flight. Parasympathetic, rest and digest. So you can only be in one or the other, and we're in sympathetic all the time. Didn't we agree? You're stressed out how often? See, our ancestors stayed in parasympathetic all the time. That's health. We stay in sympathetic, fight or flight. So when you're in sympathetic, you can't produce hydrochloric acid and all your digestive enzymes that you need, right? Because rest and digest isn't happening. So you're eating terrible food, fats and sugars. You're overeating because all you're doing is sitting there eating all the time, and I can't break it down in my stomach. We don't have enough stomach acid, so what do I get? Acid reflux, GERD, heartburn, all of that stuff, correct? So now if I get that, the heartburn is going to lead to other things because if I don't digest my foods, see, hydrochloric acid is very, very important for numerous reasons. One is calcium absorption, right? And mineral absorption because you have to ionize calcium before you can get it into the body. What does calcium do in the human body? Just say a lot of things. Very important, right? Everything, right? So now we get a decrease in calcium, which leads to all kinds of neuro problems and bone problems and muscle problems. We start to ache even more. But hydrochloric acid is your first line of defense also against what? Parasites, viruses, bacteria, bugs. Kills them, neutralizes. We're not producing it. So the way the digestion, we're going to get into this later, if I don't kill that stuff, all of a sudden, what happens? It moves down and starts to infect the body. So we start to get what's called dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is when your good bacteria, you know, probiotics, everybody takes probiotics because you want good bacteria in there. You're supposed to have all this bacteria in your gut. What does that bacteria do? Everything. Right. So it's responsible for what they say 70% of your immune system. It produces a lot of serotonin that we need. So now we're already have a deficiency in immune system and a deficiency in serotonin. We're going to make it worse, right? So now we're really in trouble. So another thing that your body did a long time ago before we got to this point is it shuts down your immune system when you're under stress. Why would that be? So anytime you're under stress, your immune system's going to be pretty much shut down. Here's why. Your immune system is metabolically expensive. When you get a cold or a flu, does it make you feel bad? No. A cold and a flu virus does nothing to you. Your immune system fighting it makes you feel bad. I can prove it to you. Next time you get sick, take a steroid shot. How do you feel? Fine. What does a steroid shot do? Shuts down the immune system. So what makes us feel bad when we get sick is the immune system fighting off the virus or bacteria. Your immune system takes a lot of energy. So when you get sick, what do you feel like doing? That's right. You want to just go lay in bed and sleep. That's by design. And so if a tiger's chasing me, do I really want my white blood cells being responsible for whether I survive or not? No, right? I need that energy for me to run from the tiger. So it shuts it down. Now later, if the tiger bites me, once I quit running, it's going to kick in and start trying to heal the wound. But for now, I need it off. And so we have no immune system. And now we have dysbiosis, so our immune system goes even lower. So now we're susceptible to what? Infections. So cold, flu, all kind of bacterial, parasitic. And so now we start to see all these stealth pathogens get in, which we're going to cover today. And people start to have these chronic illnesses that no one can explain or understand or why they got there. Starting to make sense? Also, when we get dysbiosis and we have a bad diet and all this, and I didn't even tell you the fact that what's happening with your patients while this is going on. I mean, I've got all these disease processes we see forming, and what are they doing? They're going to their doctor, and their doctor's doing what? Putting on, so antibiotics, cholesterol meds, blood pressure meds, diabetic medication. So they're inundated with all these toxic chemicals, which is further what? Stressing them out, driving this entire system. So you see how this works? See, that the whole medical model is brilliant because it drives the illness further and further and ingrains it into the human so that you have to keep what? Taking the meds. So it's brilliant. It really is. And you think they don't understand this? They've got this down. So we could keep going on and on down this rabbit hole. You could name any disease pretty much known to man, and we can tie it into this whole stress response. Does that make sense? Now, how many people have ever heard it put this way? See, the shame is we go to these schools and we're taught, like, stress, but no one ever ties it together in a usable form. So the way I just did it there and tied that together, does that make a lot more sense? So the goal is for y'all to be able to stand up and do this by memory. No, and I'm being serious. I know that sounds impossible, but it doesn't take that much studying. So here's how you do it. Instead of just memorizing it, just think it through. Like coming up with this, if you just think it through, it just makes common sense. If you just take piece by piece and start to break it down, because that's what this entire presentation is going to do the rest of the day, is we're now going to take all of this that I wrote down for you, and we're going to start unwinding it. So this is how I treat my patients. All I do with all of my patients is I look at my patients, I assess them, and I find out, where are they? Once you know where your patient sits, would it not be a lot easier to help them get out of this? Everybody say yes. That would be a yes. Okay, thank you. So, one of the biggest keys that you may be missing is going to be right here. All of us in this room are somewhere in here, correct? All of our patients are definitely in here, correct?
Yes.
What's the first thing we should do?
Address stress.
How? All right, so I'm going to ask you. This is hard. So I'm going to ask y'all to use some common sense. So this is so simple, and it's missed every time. What is the first thing our patients need to do or we need to do to start reversing this? Okay, now listen, and I'm picking on y'all for a reason because I didn't even get this at first. I'm in a sympathetic state, which is what? Fight or flight. What's the first thing they need to do? What is your body trying to get you to do? Move. The fastest way to counteract a stress response is to move. What happens if I go move and exercise? What happens to blood sugar? Right? I used it. I burned it. Effectively, if you're exercising on a regular basis, you can stop the entire cycle. Correct? Anybody disagree? So do you see how when I present on concepts. Instead of reading slides, I think it's good for you to get a concept. Because if you get a concept, you can now use it, right? Most speakers give you all this information. It's all technical and all this, and then you get to your practice and you're like, I don't remember anything he said. Something about Brussels sprouts or something. We should eat that. I don't know. And then you can't use it. But if we break this down to common sense, now we can go make an impact, right? So, if we're stressed out, how much? What did we say we're stressed out? All the time, right? So how many days a week should we exercise? Absolutely every day, 7 days a week. Just on the days you're stressed. That's all we're asking. So that's the first recommendation you should make to all of your patients. So I'm going to give you a little neurology, and this is going to help you, especially if you're married. So I talked earlier about health being right frontal lobe, and really left side brain is not so great, not so healthy, and it just so happens that men sit on the left side all the time because why? We're analytical, driven, stressed. Women tend to be more right brain. That's why y'all live longer. So when we're stressed out, men and women are different, right? Would everybody agree? So I'm going to say something that's really not politically correct for a minute. Ready? Listen to this because it's clinically important. Men and women are not equal. You're not. Now, neither are better. I'm not saying men are better than women or women are better than men, but we're not created equal. We were never meant to be equal, and we shouldn't be treated the same. This is an important concept because in today we're so politically correct, it's skewing even how we treat. It's absurd. So I'm only going to speak truth, and if someone gets their feelings hurt, it's on you because I love everyone here and I'm here to help. So if I say something that's not politically correct, get over it. Deal? All right. So we're not the same. If I take any female in here, I put her next to me, what's the first thing that you see that's different?
How we're built.
How we're built, that's right. Muscular, built thick, right? Women, smaller, thinner. Do you think that matters? Yes, right. That's the same reason if we look at neurology, women are more right brain, men are more left brain. Left brain requires, in order to de-stress, requires movement. We are muscular. Men are meant to conquer. So as a man, you have to exercise a lot more than a woman does. So a woman can get by with 30 minutes to an hour of exercise a day. A man better be moving all day. So you better be either going to the gym for a lot of hours or going for a run or walking, or in your practice, you better be moving. So we need more than 10,000 steps a day as a man. That's how a man balances. A woman needs exercise, but you know what balances a woman? Talking. I kid you not. That is how you go back to right frontal lobe as a woman. You need to talk. And I don't just mean talk. I mean you need to talk about your days, your frustrations, your stresses, the kids, your job. That is how you function. So a good exercise for you if you're married. Every night when I get home at the end of a long day, I live out on 54 acres and I have a huge rock driveway and it's got a circle drive. We go out there and we walk. And I ask her very pointed questions to get her to, what's the last thing I want to hear? All day long, what have I been doing? Listening to, most of my practice is women. So I've been sitting with women all day long and listening to them tell me all of their problems. And now I have to go home and what? Right. So I walk, and I listen the best I can. I admit sometimes it's almost like that Charlie Brown, like, wah, 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 wah. But she's getting it out, so we're both good. I'm getting the exercise, she's getting exercise, and she's getting to talk. And since we started doing that, it has been an Uh-oh. Okay. So since we've been doing that, it's actually been a complete game changer, not only health-wise, but it's been a complete game changer for our marriage, which has been absolutely crazy. So the problem you have is when you're stressed out, women, what's the last thing you want to do? Say talk, because you don't. You want to gripe, but you don't want to talk. Because I'm saying there's a difference between griping or complaining and talking. And guys are the same. They want to gripe and complain when they're stressed out, but you don't feel like really talking about stuff when you're stressed out. Men, do you want to exercise when you're stressed out? Say no. You do not, and that's the problem. And so it's the first thing we need to do, but it's the last thing we want to do. Correct?